Before the rule of Tiber Septim, all Tamriel was in chaos. The poetricizes called that period of continuous unrest, days and nights of blood and venom. The kings were a petty lot of grasping tyrants, who fought Tiber's attempts to bring order to the land. But they were as disorganized as they were dissolute, and the strong hand of Septim brought peace forcibly to Tamriel. The year was 2 896. The following year, the emperor declared the beginning of a new era, thus began the third era, Yearhalt. For 38 years, the emperor Tiber reigned supreme. It was a lawful, pious, and glorious age, when justice was known to one and all, from serf to sovereign. On Tiber's death, it reigned for an entire fortnight as if the land of Tamriel itself was weeping. The emperor's grandson, Pelagius, came to the throne. Though his reign was short, he was as strong and resolute as his father had been, and Tamriel could have enjoyed a continuation of the Golden Age. Alas, an unknown enemy of the Septim family hired that accursed organization of cutthroats, the Dark Brotherhood, to kill the Emperor Pelagius Septim as he knelt at prayer at the Temple of the One in the Imperial City. Pelagius Septim's reign lasted less than 4 years. Pelagius had no living children, so the imperial crown passed to his first cousin, the daughter of Tiber's brother Agnoith Kintura, former queen of Silvina, assumed the throne as Kintura I. Her reign was blessed with prosperity and good harvests, and she herself was an avid patroness of art, music, and dance.
Kintura's son was crowned after her death, the first emperor of Tamriel to use the imperial name Uriel. Uriel I was the great lawmaker of the Septim dynasty, and a promoter of independent organizations and guilds. Under his kind but firm hand, the Fighters Guild and the Mage Guild increased in prominence throughout Tamriel. His son and successor Uriel II reigned for 18 years, from the death of Uriel I in 364 to Pelagius Septim's accession in 382. Tragically, the rule of Uriel II was cursed with blights, plagues, and insurrections. The tenderness he inherited from his father did not serve Tamriel well, and little justice was done. Pelagius II inherited not only the throne from his father, but the debt from the latter's poor financial and judicial management. Pelagius dismissed all of the elder council, and allowed only those willing to pay great sums to resume their seats. He encouraged similar acts among his vassals, the kings of Tamriel, and by the end of his 17-year reign, Tamriel had returned to prosperity. His critics, however, have suggested that any advisor possessed of wisdom, but not of gold, had been summarily ousted by Pelagius. This may have led to some of the troubles his son Antiochus faced when he in turn became emperor.
Antiochus was certainly one of the more flamboyant members of the usually austere Septim family. He had numerous mistresses, and nearly as many wives, and was renowned for the grandeur of his dress and his high good humor. Unfortunately, his reign was rife with civil war, surpassing even that of his grandfather Uriel II. The War of the Isle in 3E110, 12 years after Antiochus assumed the throne, nearly took the province of Somerset Isle away from Tamriel. The united alliance of the kings of Somerset and Antiochus only managed to defeat King Ogham of the island kingdom of Pyandinia due to a freak storm. Legend credits the Sigic Order of the Isle of Artium with the sorcery behind the tempest. The story of Kintyra II, heiress to her father Antiochus' throne, is certainly one of the saddest tales in imperial history. Her first cousin Uriel, son of Queen Potima of Solitude, accused Kintyra of being a bastard, alluding to the infamous decadence of the imperial city during her father's reign. When this accusation failed to stop her coronation, Uriel bought the support of several disgruntled kings of High Rock, Skyrim, and Morrowind, and with Queen Potima's assistance, he coordinated 3 attacks on the Septim Empire. The first attack occurred in the Iliac Bay region, which separates High Rock and Hammerfell. Kintyra's entourage was massacred and the empress taken captive. For 2 years, Kintyra II languished in an imperial prison believed to be somewhere in Glenpoint or Glenmoril before she was slain in her cell under mysterious circumstances. The second attack was on a series of imperial garrisons along the coastal Morrowind Islands. The Empress Consort Contin Earrings fell defending the forts. The third and final attack was a siege of the imperial city itself, occurring after the Elder Council had split up the army to attack western High Rock and eastern Morrowind. The weakened government had little defense against Uriel's determined aggression, and capitulated after only a fortnight of resistance. Uriel took the throne that same evening and proclaimed himself Uriel III, Emperor of Tamriel. The year was 3E121. Thus began the War of the Red Diamond.
Kinter's murder in Glenpoint while in captivity is considered by some to be the end of the pure strain of Septim blood in the imperial family. Certainly it marks the end of something significant. Uriel III not only proclaimed himself Emperor of Tamriel, but also Uriel Septim III, taking the eminent surname as a title. In truth, his surname was Mantiarco, from his father's line. In time, Uriel III was deposed and his crimes reviled, but the tradition of taking the name Septim as a title for the Emperor of Tamriel did not die with him. For 6 years, the War of the Red Diamond, which takes its name from the Septim family's famous badge, tore the empire apart. The combatants were the 3 surviving children of Pelagius Septim III, Potima, Sepphoris, Magnus, and their various offspring. Potima, of course, supported her son Uriel III, and had the combined support of all of Skyrim and northern Morrowind. With the efforts of Sepphoris and Magnus, however, the province of High Rock turned coat. The provinces of Hammerfell, Somerset Isle, Valenwood, Elsewhere, and Black Marsh were divided in their loyalty, but most kings supported Sepphoris and Magnus. In 3E127, Uriel III was captured at the Battle of Ikadag in Hammerfell. En route to his trial in the imperial city, a mob overtook his prisoner's carriage and burned him alive within it. His captor and uncle continued on to the imperial city, and by common acclaim was proclaimed Sepphoris I, Emperor of Tamriel.
Sepphoris' reign was marked by nothing but war. By all accounts, he was a kind and intelligent man, but what Tamriel needed was a great warrior, and he, fortunately, was that. It took an additional 10 years of constant warfare for him to defeat his sister Potima. The so-called Wolf Queen of Solitude, who died in the siege of her city-state in the year 137. Sepphoris survived his sister by only 3 years. He never had time during the war years to marry, so it was his brother, the 4th child of Pelagius Septim II, who assumed the throne. The Emperor Magnus was already elderly when he took up the imperial diadem, and the business of punishing the traitorous kings of the War of the Red Diamond drained much of his remaining strength. Legend accuses Magnus' son and heir Pelagius Septim III of patricide, but that seems highly unlikely, for no other reason than that Pelagius was king of Solitude, following the death of Potima, and seldom visited the imperial city. Pelagius Septim III, sometimes called Pelagius the Mad, was proclaimed emperor in the 145th year of the Third Era. Almost from the start, his eccentricities of behavior were noted at court. He embarrassed dignitaries, offended his vassal kings, and on one occasion marked the end of an imperial grand ball by attempting to hang himself. His long-suffering wife was finally awarded the regency of Tamriel, and Pelagius Septim III was sent to a series of healing institutions and asylums until his death in 3E153 at the age of 34.
The Empress Regent of Tamriel was proclaimed Empress Kataraya I upon the death of her husband. Some who do not mark the end of the Septim bloodline with the death of Kintyra II consider the ascendancy of this dark elf woman the true mark of its decline. Her defenders, on the other hand, assert that though Kataraya was not descended from Tiber, the son she had with Pelagius was, so the imperial chain did continue. Despite racist assertions to the contrary, Kataraya's 46-year reign was one of the most celebrated in Tamriel's history. Uncomfortable in the imperial city, Kataraya traveled extensively throughout the empire such as no emperor ever had since Tiber's day. She repaired much of the damage that previous emperors' broken alliances and bungled diplomacy created. The people of Tamriel came to love their empress far more than the nobility did. Cataraya's death in a minor skirmish in Black Marsh is a favorite subject of conspiracy-minded historians. The sage Montalia's discovery, for instance, of a disenfranchised branch of the Septim family and their involvement with the skirmish was a revelation indeed. When Cassander assumed the throne upon the death of his mother, he was already middle-aged. Only half-elven, he aged like a Breton. In fact, he had left the rule of Wayrest to his half-brother Uriel due to poor health. Nevertheless, as the only true blood relation of Pelagius and thus Tiber, he was pressed into accepting the throne. To no one's surprise, the Emperor Cassander's reign did not last long. In 2 years he joined his predecessors in eternal slumber. Uriel Lariat, Cassander's half-brother, and the child of Cataraya I and her imperial consort Galavir Lariat, after the death of Pelagius Septim III, left the kingdom of Wayrest to reign as Uriel IV. Legally, Uriel IV was a Septim. Cassander had adopted him into the royal family when he had become king of Wayrest. Nevertheless, to the council and the people of Tamriel, he was a bastard child of Cataraya. Uriel did not possess the dynamism of his mother, and his long 43-year reign was a hotbed of sedition.
It will be recalled that Uriel IV was not a Septim by birth. His mother, though she reigned as empress for many years, was a dark elf married to a true Septim emperor, Pelagius Septim III. Uriel's father was actually Cataraya's consort after Pelagius' death, a Breton nobleman named Galavir Lariat. Before taking the throne of the empire, Cassander had ruled the kingdom of Wayrest, but poor health had forced him to retire. Cassander had no children, so he legally adopted his half-brother Uriel and abdicated the kingdom. 7 years later, Cassander inherited the empire at the death of his mother. 3 years after that, Uriel once again found himself the recipient of Cassander's inheritance. Uriel IV's reign was a long and difficult one. Despite being a legally adopted member of the Septim family, and despite the Lariat family's high position indeed, they were distant cousins of the Septims. Few of the Elder Council could be persuaded to accept him fully as a blood descendant of Tiber. The council had assumed much responsibility during Cataraya's long reign and Cassander's short one, and a strong-willed, alien monarch like Uriel IV found it impossible to command their unswerving fealty. Time and again the council and emperor were at odds, and time and again the council won the battles. Since the days of Pelagius Septim II, the Elder Council had consisted of the wealthiest men and women in the empire, and the power they wielded was conclusive.
The council's last victory over Uriel IV was posthumous. Andorak Septim, Uriel IV's son, was disinherited by vote of council, and a cousin more closely related to the original Septim line was proclaimed Sepphoris II in 3E247. For the first 9 years of Sepphoris II's reign, those loyal to Andorak Septim battled the imperial forces. In an act that the sage Araintine called Tiber Septim's heart beating no more, the council granted Andorak Septim the High Rock Kingdom of Shornhelm to end the war, and Andorak Septim's descendants still rule there. By and large, Sepphoris II had foes that demanded more of his attention than Andorak. From out of a Cimmerian nightmare, in the words of Araintine, a man who called himself the Camoran usurper led an army of Daedra and undead warriors on a rampage through Valenwood, conquering kingdom after kingdom. Few could resist his onslaughts, and as month turned to bloody month in the year 3E249, even fewer tried. Sepphoris II sent more and more mercenaries into Hammerfell to stop the usurper's northward march, but they were bribed or slaughtered and raised as undead. The story of the Camoran usurper deserves a book of its own. It is recommended that the reader find Palo Ulfa's The Fall of the Usurper for more detail. In short, however, the destruction of the forces of the usurper had little to do with the efforts of the emperor. The result was a great regional victory and an increase in hostility toward the seemingly inefficacious empire. Uriel V, Sepphoris the second's son and successor, swiveled opinion back toward the latent power of the empire. Turning the attention of Tamriel away from internal strife, Uriel V embarked on a series of invasions beginning almost from the moment he took the throne in 3E268. Uriel V conquered Roscrea in 271, Cathnaqui in 276, Innisli in 279, and Esroniet in 284. In 3E288, he embarked on his most ambitious enterprise, the invasion of the continent kingdom of Akavir. This ultimately proved a failure, for 2 years later, Uriel V was killed in Akavir on the battlefield of Ionith. Nevertheless, Uriel V holds a reputation second only to Tiber as one of the 2 great warrior emperors of Tamriel.